There's a reason that we live so far from Hollywood, in the country looking hard to find a home, with nothing perfect or considered, but we're so damn good. It's the story of your life, you're moving down the page, and you know you're on your way. The story of your
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi. You know, I begin every day, every show with the John Androsik Fight for Fighting. This is the tale of your life. And the subject of that was in with me in the studio, not in the studio, at the house yesterday. John Androsik and Carla stopped by, and we ended up talking for 4 hours after I'd been over on Special Report. And then they went on their merry way. It was wonderful. Carla's an amazing person, and that story, which is about her, that song is about her story, it's a good way to get the morning going. I hope you are figuring out where you're going with your life, the story of your life today. It's Wednesday, February 16th, year of our Lord 2022. I'm Hugh Hewitt, not on the Beltway. I'm in the West Coast until mid-March because I don't like the snow. I'm from Ohio. You folks in Cleveland know this. Pretty much, I don't like the cold and the snow from January to March. I don't. And I gave it up a long time ago. So I flee back to California for 10 weeks. Usually I teach. I'm not teaching this year. And one of the reasons is there's so much going on. I'm actually focused almost 24/7 on the news. Here is the rundown. The NATO chief, Stoltenberg, said, not buying this Russian claim of withdrawal. European stocks have ticked higher again this morning, thinking this is the day of unity that they are celebrating in Ukraine, a day of unity as they are menaced from around the world. And the deal remains very much in doubt. New York Times headline, on Ukraine, U.S. and Russia wage a signaling war to avert an actual war. How dramatic. Joe Biden gave a good speech yesterday. A good speech, not a great speech, but it was good. It was short. It was to the point. It's not 1 inch of NATO territory can be crossed without triggering Article 5. A necessary response to Vladimir Putin last week saying, Article 5, what's Article 5? Will be at the North Sea or the Baltic before you can say Article 5. That's not actually the case. They got the 101st and the 82nd over there. Lots of other allied troops, lots of NATO. I don't think the Baltics feel like they're under the thumb that Ukraine is. Russia, Wall Street Journal says some troops are pulling back from the Ukraine border. The Secretary of Defense, we have an invisible Secretary of Defense, General Austin. He doesn't say much or do much, or we don't hear much from him, but they have a Secretary of Defense of the United Kingdom. His name is Ben Wallace, kind of a head-down guy. Yesterday he said that Vladimir Putin is a man looking for a legacy. Well, that's not a good thing. He was on ITV's Good Morning Britain this morning, a few hours ahead of us, obviously, saying that legacy could be a driving force for the Russian president. We are always in danger of miscalculation, or indeed, as you say, a false start, and that would be catastrophic or tragic for the people of Ukraine. It could also spill. Ben Wallace went on to say that Russian forces have the potential to overwhelm Ukraine at 3 and 4 to 1 on the attack. What I said on Brett Baer's special report last night, I do not know how four administrations in a row have gotten Putin wrong. Is this a head fake? Is he going away? We don't really know Putin, and we never have known Putin. Cut number 28, I'm talking to Brett Baer on special report last night.
Hugh, where we stand today, is it much different than where we stood yesterday?
There's a head fake underway, Brett. I had Senator Dan Sullivan on my radio show this morning, and he said head fake, he doesn't believe Putin. I agree with what former Secretary of State Pompeo told you at the start of the show. Distrust and verify everything the Russians say they are doing. And the good news is the president gave a very good statement today. Not 1 inch of a NATO country can be invaded without triggering the defensive response of every NATO country. So we should give props to the president for clarity on that. But the bad and the ugly is, why are we rushing arms to Ukraine at this late minute? It's not like this is a surprise that Putin has been menacing the country since 2014. And the ugly part is he's actually played the last 4 administrations, including Trump's, pretty well in terms of surprising us all the time. At some point, we're going to figure out Putin is a mafia-like figure who's running a gas station, to quote Tom Cotton this morning. But we haven't figured it out yet. We haven't figured it out yet. And yesterday I received a text from a friend associated with NATO, I'll put it that way, saying he thought it would be last night, the invasion. And so they're clearly, within NATO forces, clearly believe that Putin is riding a wave here and intends to go in. So don't let your hopes up. I know the stock market blew up a little bit yesterday. Just be forewarned is forearmed. NATO says Russian troops' numbers are still rising all along the Ukraine border. So that is from the Financial Times, very reputable. Washington Post. Russia aims to ward off NATO in the event of a Ukraine invasion. There is no warding off America. There's none. There's zero warding off America because we're not threatening, and Putin knows it, and I know it, and it's absurd to report that stuff. President Biden did say there is room for diplomacy. I want to play his statement. This is Joe Biden yesterday talking about I got to find it right here. Cut number 4.
I will not pretend this will be painless. There could be impact on our energy prices. So we are taking active steps to alleviate the pressure on our own energy markets and offset raising prices. We're coordinating with major energy consumers and producers. We're prepared to deploy all the tools and authority at our disposal to provide relief at the gas pump. And I'll work with Congress on additional measures to help protect consumers and address the impact of prices at the pump. We are not seeking direct confrontation with Russia, though I've been clear that if Russia targets Americans in Ukraine, we will respond forcefully. And if Russia attacks the United States or our allies through asymmetric means, like disruptive cyber attacks against our companies or critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. But we're moving in lockstep with our NATO allies and partners to deepen our collective defense against threats in cyberspace.
I want to also play what former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said to Bret Baier last night. Cut number 23.
Well, Brett, it's hard to go wrong with that Reagan aphorism. I might add distrust, but verify. I heard Putin today speaking, acting as if he was the peacemaker, when he was, in fact, the person who brought all this current kerfuffle on. We shouldn't credit him for now making a statement that says, well, maybe it's time for me to negotiate and I'll pull some of my troops back. You know, the other thing we need to make sure to keep in mind, Brett, is that it's not binary. We talk about it, invasion or not. In fact, we saw the cyber attacks today. We'll see where they actually came from. But Vladimir Putin's been at war with the West for an awfully long time, and in Ukraine in particular. You can't forget he took 1/5 of that country just a handful of years ago. So we're always caught up in just the moment. We were working so hard at this, Brett. I met with my counterpart many, many times, Mr. Narishkin at the SVR, met with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin thanked me and President Trump for saving lives in St. Petersburg. We always
stop
knew
there
that,
because I also want to play for you Mike Pompeo talking about Trump, Russia, Pompeo, Russia, cut number 25.
Yes, it's true. We do have interest in Ukraine. I've heard some say that we don't have any interest there. I've heard others say we have maximal interest there. It's the case that we have important interests that we should defend them, but every situation is different. This one is certainly the case. Russia does have the impact that President Biden described. They can affect American lives. A big chunk of wheat flows through the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Energy prices for sure. He can constrict and destabilize the market. He can mess around in the Middle East and present real risk to our friend and ally Israel. Vladimir Putin has many tools, not the least of which is still 1,000 nuclear warheads. We gave him at the very beginning of this administration, we gave him the brand new extension of New START, asking for nothing when New START covers almost all of our weapons and just a fraction of the Russian weapon systems. Those are the kinds of mistakes that lead someone like Vladimir Putin to believe that he can push around the United States. That's the big mistake. Just last comment here, Brett. People have asked, would this have happened under President Trump? I don't think so. I can tell you this. It didn't happen. And the only thing that has changed was who was leading the United States of America.
That's it. Could it have happened under Trump? Well, it didn't happen under Trump. It happened under Obama, and it's happening under Biden. My last comment on on special report to Bret Baier last night was about why Putin can keep doing this for a long time. Cut 29.
Hugh, final word here. Do we think that it's still in the minds of people who look at this and the intelligence community an imminent thing?
Yes, I do. I've gotten texts all day long from people associated with NATO in Europe who expect it to go off tonight, that it's a disinformation. We will wait and see, but we should not be surprised by anything. And Putin is paying for this every day that gas is close to $100 a barrel. He's paying for it since Russia sells 1 out of every 10 barrels of oil in the world comes from Russia. So the longer he can keep the oil market screwed up, the longer he's going to menace Ukraine. That's the bottom line. He's making money. It's like he's got an IRA building at a rapid pace. The longer he keeps his tanks there, and we act like this, so I don't expect this crisis to be over. 1-800-520-1234. Your calls are welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance, right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to
Good Wednesday morning to you. Oh my gosh, I'm losing days as the week rolls along. It's already hump day, February the 16th in the year of our Lord 2022. President Biden gave a speech yesterday in the National Association of Counties. He told a story about a dead dog that simply isn't true. Cut number one.
I got a call one night. A woman said to me, obviously not of the same persuasion as I was politically, called me and said, "There's a dead dog on my lawn." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "Have you called the county?" He said, "Yes, they're not here." And I said, "Well, I'll get him in the morning." She said, "I want it removed now. I pay your salary." So I went over. I picked it up. She said, "I want it out of my front yard." I put it on her doorstep.
You know, that's a funny story that's not true, that he's told often, and it's known it's not true. But he wants to talk about then. He's really getting foggy on when things happen. Cut number two from the National Association of Counties speech.
Think about it. Think about it. It was well intended originally when the child care tax credit, when the child tax credit existed early on, because you said, well, we got to give a break for raising kids. But I remember it used to drive my dad nuts because we had 4 kids. It was a lot less. It was less than $1,000 then. But you know, if you're making what was $12,000 a year, that was like making 40 now or 50. If you're making that kind of money, you didn't have any taxes you could deduct it from. So there wasn't any benefit for your kids.
You know, it wasn't around. It did not exist. It has not happened. The child tax credit came in when Joe Biden was 54 years old and 97. So when he says stuff like, "It used to drive my dad crazy," it's not true. Last bit from his National Association of Counties speech. Not sure when this speech was. 5 days after he was inaugurated. Cut number 3.
Look, we can cap the cost of insulin to $35 a month. Drug companies will still make money. Let me digress just for a moment. I started the cancer moonshot, which I worked very hard on in the administration I served in last. And I held conferences all over the country with literally thousands of people.
He did not. This speech is really an incoherent mess. And so the president gave a short, specific teleprompter speech at the White House, which was pretty good. It reaffirmed NATO. It said what it needed to say. Then he goes off prompter and he's retailing stories that don't make any sense. He's blanking on Obama's name. Cut number 3.
I will not pretend this will be...
Okay. Never mind. They just played that. I want to go down to Jen Psaki at the White House yesterday, trying to credit Joe Biden for a 10-cent drop in the cost of gas. Cut number 8.
In terms of the price of gasoline, what we've seen is we know back in December, it went down by about 10 cents thanks to tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, something where there are still releases that have been ongoing.
The gas is 20 cents higher a gallon now than when Jen Psaki is referring to. Literally, they have no message because they have no strategy, because they have no idea what Russia's doing and what inflation is doing. Last thing, Chairman Mike McCall, he's the future chairman of defense, I believe, in the House, talks about what Robert Gates, who sucked death to two presidents, Democrat and Republican, said about Biden, cut number 10.
That's a toboggan run, right? Yeah. I mean,
cut number 10?
This is, I think, Secretary of Defense Gates was correct. He's been wrong on every foreign policy decision for the last 3 decades. He's wrong on this one. And to underestimate Putin's desire to take over the Ukraine would be the largest invasion since World War II in Europe. It is a very big foreign policy failure.
You bet. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast, not inside the Beltway. I'm watching from afar. Nancy Pelosi in Israel, so it's not like D.C. is where everything is happening. Let's do a market update brought to you by Birch Gold. If you're buying gold, and a lot of you are, always remember, as I tell you in the first hour every day with the market update from yesterday, do it at hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 989898. I personally do not believe in numismatics. I wouldn't buy one. I do believe and do own gold, but I own maple leaves and eagles. And I put them in the safety deposit box in a bank far away and wait. That's my, oh my gosh, the world has gone to a hell money. And you may want some of that in your IRA or 401k, and I don't recommend it. Those should be diversified accounts, but you should have some physical gold and use Birch Gold to do that. They establish and maintain those depositories so that the IRS agrees that when you add your $2,800 a year, or whatever it is, I don't know what it is this year, in an IRA or a Roth or a regular SEP IRA, that is a IRA-approved facility, third-party facility. That's why Birch Gold exists. They'll send you the free information on how they set it up. You send them the money. I tell you, buy bullion, buy coins. Do not buy numismatics. Buy coins, I mean buy maple leaf ounces, so you know what it's worth. Gold trading up this morning at $1,856 an ounce. Yesterday, on the hope that Russia isn't going to start the first major land war in Europe since 1945, the Dow went up 422, the S&P went up 69, and the Nasdaq went up 348. This morning overseas, we have mixed markets. And by mixed markets, I mean very little. Germany is up 0.03%. France is up 0.01%. England is down 0.25%. And that's all because nobody knows what Putin's doing. Oil is at, I want to make sure, that's why he's doing this. He's doing for the cost of oil. It's at 93 again. It's up 1.5%. And every day that he keeps his trucks parked there and his tanks pointed at Ukraine, oil markets worry, because if that invasion goes off, all of the gas supplies of Europe go wacky. Many thousands of people will die as well. That's the number one concern. But the oil markets will be thrown into a tizzy as Russian oil will be sanctioned. Russian tankers won't be allowed to do port calls except in China. China might, now the market is one market. So if Russia sells all of its oil to China and China sells and stops buying more Middle Eastern oil, then that Middle Eastern oil goes to Europe. It's just a big increased cost for everyone, but it will hurt Russia in the short term, and that's a good thing. The other sanctions that would be forthcoming would be wonderful as well. I don't often, well, first I'm going to talk to you about Ukraine. 1-800-5201-234, reactions and thoughts. Let's talk with Ava in Chicago. Good morning, Ava. What do you think?
Good morning, Hugh. Yeah, I think Putin got several things out of this. One is the obvious that we won't back up our allies, but also he met with Xi earlier, and now it's like in a two-front situation. We won't show up, and if Xi wants to take Taiwan, that's just like, you know, it's an open deal. But also now Putin got something for Xi. He showed him that, and now Xi owes Putin.
Well, they are like Japan and Germany in the 30s. They're working together. Thank you, Ava. Let's talk to, who's in Ohio? Is it Kirk? Keith in Ohio.
Yes, I was wanting to know why we're not bound by the Budapest Memorandum.
Because it's not self-executing. We signed it, they signed it, it's not self-executing. NATO has a self-executing Article 5, so that if one, the caller, Keith, is referring to an agreement in 2014 when Ukraine gave away its nuclear weapons, and the West guaranteed its boundaries, the UN guarantees its boundaries, and Russia guaranteed its boundaries. But there was no obligation to come to the rescue of it if that didn't work. So it's a meaning, like most diplomacy, unbacked by threats of force, it doesn't work. And diplomacy that has threats of force can sometimes go running off in a terrible direction. Does that make sense?
I just felt like if we told them if you give up the nuclear weapons, we'll protect you, we should be protected.
I agree. And they did not negotiate that. I think, look, 1994 is Bill Clinton. That's the same year that they thought Korea was going to invade South Korea, so he sent Wendy Sherman over there to give the dictator everything they wanted, so we have nukes in Korea now. The Clinton administration will be remembered by history as just a disastrous misplay of the early years of the peace. We won the Cold War. Reagan and Bush won the Cold War. Bill Clinton got handed because of Ross Perot, the presidency, and he was not serious, and he did not have serious people around him. They did not extend NATO to Ukraine when they could have. They rushed to get rid of nukes because they thought all nukes are bad. Well, nukes aren't bad when they're with regimes that keep bad guys away. They botched it. They botched everything they did. Clinton, and then Obama was worse, and now Biden is the worst. If you elect Democrats, bad things happen in the world. Thank you. I got to read you the biggest domestic political story of yesterday. It came up pretty early this morning, 12:28 a.m. on the East Coast. So you may not have seen this yet. San Francisco school board members ousted in a parental backlash. First returns show that voters overwhelmingly voted yes to recall Allison Collins, Gabriela Lopez, and Fauga Maliga, 3 of the board's 7 members. San Francisco voters have recalled 3 school board members who spurred a parental backlash for pursuing the renaming of schools and other progressive policy changes as classrooms remained empty during the coronavirus pandemic. Look, it's not one issue. Yes, they were out of their minds trying to change the name of Thomas Jefferson High School. They were trying to change the name of Abraham Lincoln High School. They're just dummies, lefty dummies. And you run into them, you know them, I know them. They call the show sometimes. There's seminar call. You can call me now, 1-800-520-1234. But turns out that the city of San Francisco has enough parents in it who do not want their school system run by lunatics. They also had a lot of lockdown, a lot of remote learning that lost a lot of students. They still have masks. It is still a nightmare to live in the city. It is a way to show that people are disgusted with the school board. 79% of people voted to remove Collins. 75% Lopez, 73% Maliga. That is not a wave. That is a tsunami, followed by a tsunami, followed by a tsunami. That is going to happen all over the country. Now, I know if you're a school board member, and you're driving along, you're thinking, that's not me, that's San Francisco. My parents like me, no one ever comes to my school board to yell at me. You have no idea that they will not vote for you. You should just quit unless you want to be embarrassingly beaten. Now, I don't think they'll go through recalls in many cities. It takes a lot of time. Moms and dads are actually busy. But in San Francisco, which is used to signing a petition on every corner, it's very easy to get people recalled. But I didn't expect 3 out of 3, and I didn't expect above 70% for all 3 of them. My God, 80% for one of them in San Francisco, because they're Prague. So what does that tell you? Extrapolate for a second. San Francisco voters recalled 3 of their 7 board members, their most left-wing nutty ones, by an 75% and higher vote. What does that tell you? I want to be accurate. It was 73, 75, and 79%, respectively. It's a tidal wave. It doesn't happen in Soviet states and in uncontested elections. And so these were very contested. They wanted to stay. The voters of this city have sent a clear message, said Mayor London Breed, that the school board must focus on the essentials of delivering a well-run school system above all else. That's not really what the message is. The message is they hate the woke stuff and they hate the masks. That's the message. London Breed is getting the message. Democrats are protecting each other. Okay, against that message, Tony Fauci made a rare appearance. Where did he come? MSNBC, of course. So he could talk to 8 people. And on MSNBC, he says to Hallie Jackson, cut number 14.
Hallie, it looks like the standard vaccination regimen for children of that age group, namely 6 months to 4 years plus up to 5, is going to be a 3-dose regimen. What had happened is that it was hopeful that a 2-dose regimen would be able to do it. As the data began coming in, it became clear that they wanted to continue with the 3-dose study before making any determination about the efficacy. There's no doubt about the...
They want it. It's been 2 years. Tony Fauci is 2 years older. He's become 2 years less adept at explaining what the hell he's talking about. And with this rollout, they've ruined the chances of child vaccination being sufficient to cover that cohort. They're all going to get COVID, which is fine because it's not fine because a handful of children will tragically die from COVID. Nothing like car crashes, nothing like crossing the street crashes, nothing like accidents that typically mark why kids die. But they will die, and it will be terrible and tragic. Tony Fauci, ham-handed. I mean, he's on MSNBC. He's talking to 8 people. Hallie Jackson, I know MSNBC very well, and Hallie's wonderful, and she does a good job, but it's the last place you'll go. He has zero influence in the United States right now. Zero. He's just a signaling device. So he goes on and says, no, lifting the mandate's not political at all. Cut 15.
Well, Hallie, I wouldn't say it's the politics. I think it's the different evaluation of what's right for a particular community. I mean, we use the word politics. I'm not so sure it's that. I just think at the local level, there's a strong feeling of needing to get back.
What kind of a scientist doesn't understand that the mask mandates are falling because of politics? Really, what kind of a public policymaker doesn't understand that everything is changing because of politics? What kind of policymaker comes on 2 days after the Super Bowl, when I checked this out yesterday with a Super Bowl attendee in a box? Actually, I talked to Eric Swalwell, who also didn't have a mask on. No one had a mask on. Whole SoFi Stadium. Anthony Fauci, one more cut. Nothing I do is political. Anthony Fauci cuts it.
It's very difficult to explain, and I think it's just the divisiveness that we see in this country. If you look back, Hallie, at everything that I have said over 2 years, it's been based on trying to preserve the health and the safety of the American public, whether that's talking about vaccines, whether that's talking about masks. There's nothing political at all in what I do, and it is really unfortunate.
It's just that you're wrong. I wish you would have followed up. I'm not saying you yourself are doing it for the Republican. Have you been wrong? Have you undermined confidence? Have you changed your mind? Did you attempt to mislead people about masks? Did you screw up the guidance? Did you screw up the rollout? Where are the tests? Who botched the first test? You're a complete disaster. Why won't you quit? That's why Tony doesn't come on this show anymore. I'm very polite, but everybody knows he's not political. Everybody knows he's also not very good at this anymore. Let me take my relief factor. Got my 5 miles in yesterday after my 10 on Saturday, so I'm a little bit slow. And talking to Carla Andrazik, that woman is an athlete. I mean, they really go, 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 go. So I carried in Kirkman and Resveratrol Omega. There they are. Every single morning. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you just saw that the coffee was a little bit warmer than normal. I poured it in the last break. And so, yes, you can take Icarian Curcumin Resveratrol Omega with warm coffee. I prefer stone cold coffee. It's like water, but it's got caffeine in it. In any event, those 4 pills make up the Relief Factor packet every single morning. Easy to open, easy to swallow, easy to feel better throughout the day. Get out and exercise today. Go walking. I don't care if it's 100 yards. You can do it right now. You can walk the end of the driveway and just go further tomorrow. Relief Factor.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the cross, don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening this morning. Got a lot coming up. Congressman Mike Gallagher, Brian Wesbury, Katie Pavlich. Scott Lehigh, Boston Globe columnist from the left, is joining me. Smart guy. We'll see how that goes later in the show. I'd like to check in with a lefty every now and then. Politico has a story this morning on the Senate race in Missouri. Now, if you listen to the show for any times, you know that Eric Greitens is a disaster, the former governor who was indicted and then dropped, who was investigated in 2018 by Josh Hawley for his use of a charity donor list, who was the suspect in a invasion of privacy case after allegations that he took unauthorized nude photographs of his hairstylist while sexually assaulting her in his basement in 2015. Very kinky thing. Greitens admitted to engaging in an extramarital affair with the woman, but insisted that the encounters were consensual. That charge was dropped for lack of evidence, but the Missouri legislature was going to impeach Greitens. So I had him on the show. It was an utter disaster, a train wreck. He can't answer a single question because guilty, guilty, guilty. And he's running as he's trying to be Trump, but he's not Trump. He wasn't a big Trump guy before. He was a Democrat until 2 years before he became a Republican. And he wasn't a big Trump guy. He's just trying to rehab himself. And it's a nightmare. We'll lose that seat, we being the Republican Party. If Greitens is the nominee, we'll lose that seat. The senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, took a look at the list of people running, and he endorsed Congresswoman Vicky, I gotta get her last name right correctly. I'm saying Holly, but I think it's Hartley. Hartzler, Vicky Hartzler. I'm going to have trouble with that. Holly and Hartzler. Congresswoman Hartzler is the only woman in the race. Billy Long, Eric Smith. There's a lot of people running, and Billy Long was very upset with Holly over the Senate endorsement, and a super PAC got behind Hartzler as well. So there's momentum for Hartzler in Missouri. All I tell you folks in Missouri who are listening and who have friends in Missouri, do not vote for Eric Greitens. Do not. We will lose the race with Eric Greitens. That is just a mortal lock. It's the only thing you need to know is that we will lose the race with Eric Greitens. Now, yesterday at the end of Special Report, there was a segment on the Durham report. I want you to hear it because I've talked about the Durham filing. There wasn't an indictment last week. There was another filing. What's going on? What's going on is they're still looking for their John Dean to turn over on people and name names. Here is that segment, cut number 27.
What about that? We're back with the panel, Hugh, Mara, and Tom. We're also joined by Andrew McCarthy, former assistant United States attorney. Andy, I want to start with you and address some of, what we saw from some of that coverage, which is it's just not there and they don't see it. And what about that?
Well, I think there ought to be a lot more coverage, Brett, because it's very alarming. But you do have to keep reminding yourself that the only thing that Durham has alleged at this point is in connection with Michael Sussman, the Democratic Party connected lawyer. The only thing he's alleged is that he misled the FBI about who his clients were. He hasn't even alleged that the information that they brought to him was in any way fraudulent, although it's been suggested that it's misleading. And Durham is operating from a premise that the government officials were duped, not that they were in on it. I think if you're going to have a Watergate-style, bonanza of a conspiracy, and we'll have to see what Durham's final product looks like, but you would think that the government officials in that kind of an arrangement would be driving the train. And here what Durham is basically saying is that they were saps.
Yeah. But Andy, when you look at that filing, what's, number one, most troubling to you? And number two, how do you read it? Is this an effort to get Sussman to help and assist and go bigger?
Well, any prosecutor wants to have somebody cooperate and go higher. So that's kind of always thrumming in the mix. But what I see, Brett, is that, there's an interesting allegation that's made, but it doesn't change the underlying facts of the case. And from Sussman's perspective, at least from what his lawyers are saying, they think it's a weak false statements case because it's only Sussman and the FBI's general counsel in the room. So it's one guy's recollection against the others. It's not transcribed. It's not recorded. And they think that James Baker, the FBI's general counsel, has made different versions of what happened on different occasions.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal has this. Trump really was spied on. White House communications are supposed to be secure. The notion that any contractor, much less one with ties to a presidential campaign, could access them is alarming enough. The implication that the data was exploited for a political purpose is a scandal that requires investigation under oath. The unfolding information underscores that the Russia collusion story was one of the dirtiest tricks in U.S. political history. Mr. Durham should tell the whole sordid story. And Hugh, the question is, will he and when?
Well, it depends on Mr. Sussman. It seems to me that the analogy that Sussman is, he's either going to be John Dean, who was the desk officer for Watergate, who rolled over and made a deal with the prosecutors and brought everyone down, or he's going to be G. Gordon Liddy, and the only people who are going to get penalized for this are him and Perkins' partners who are going to have to pay any liability. But if Sussman doesn't say anything, I think what Andy just said about the fact that it's a one-on-one conversation with the FBI general counsel in a weak false statements case, right now Sussman is staying very strong, silent, and pushing back. So I just don't have a lot of optimism that this goes big unless he rolls over like John Dean did and rat everyone out. Yeah. He's not going to rat everyone out.
Your thoughts?
It's Team Clinton. Don't hold your breath. I'll be right back. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show coming up on this Wednesday, February the 15th, 2022.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns to break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds.
And I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot. And how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since 1st grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing, and we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD School Board. We went down, and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, why are Republicans not for anything? Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of adrenaline that is necessary and deploy him out there. I think the point was to try to show that Joe Biden was going to go over the top long, to try to win kudos and praise from the establishment media. This is his first press conference I think he's done in quite some time. Some people said it was his first ever press conference as president. Second? Okay. That was his second press conference. Trump used to do these almost daily. He did them for fun. And I will say, for reasons that we can speculate, the media was pretty critical. They were direct, precise. Now, nowhere even in the ecosystem, nowhere even in the atmosphere of questions towards Donald Trump. And I agree with my friend Tucker Carlson. The press conference was totally weird. It was a strange deal. Joe Biden leaning in. He does this thing where he kind of like hunches over the podium. You notice that, Connor? And he kind of puts both of his arms down and he looks directly at the reporter. And then he whispers. You're exactly right. And he was still calling from a pre-selected list of reporters. And there were multiple blunders that came out of that. But if the point was to try to show the nation, look at, hey, if you have any concerns about how sharp this guy is mentally, I mean, come on. He stood there and talked for 2 hours. I don't think that mission was accomplished.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
As God, He warned us that a time of great deception would come. But we must hold on to our faith that one day He would return to save us from the end of the world.
What if there was evidence that proves that this is all real? Because there were so many people bringing up little bits and pieces of this. I'm thinking, there's got to be a pattern here. This discovery proves that he is coming back. This is the most profound discovery in human history.
Look for Salem.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt, live from the West Coast this morning. Wall Street Journal just updated its Ukraine coverage. Breaking news. Russia's defense ministry said this morning it was withdrawing troops from the Crimea, that's that peninsula where a famous war was fought 200 years ago, following the completion of military drills as Western intelligence reports that Moscow could invade its smaller neighbor as soon as today. Although that did not happen. It was believed to have going to happen last night. It didn't happen. Defense officials said the Russian troops were returning to their permanent place of deployment, but their destination couldn't be independently confirmed, and large Russian military exercises continued across a broad front elsewhere near Ukraine, including the Belarusian border. The announcement follows a statement on Tuesday that Putin had withdrawn a small number of their troops. This is an attempt to keep oil high. Now, let me check markets, brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. If you are buying a house, if you're refinancing, if you're strapped for cash and you want to get money out of your bank, which is your house, or you're a senior and you want to get a reverse mortgage, you go to andrewandtodd.com. Great sponsor of the show, great sponsor of this segment. They are lenders, all right? So they lend you money. They look at what you've got or what you need, and they look at what you have, and they tell you if they can. And then they give you a letter, and you go out and you buy the house or you refinance, and they get it done quickly, soup to nuts, 60 days, sometimes 30. They lend you the money. They underwrite the loan. They tell you up, down, yay or nay. They represent you. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian and their team are very, very good. Call them at 888-888-1172. In the headlines this morning, Bank of England says inflation exceeds its expectations, going to hit a new 30-year high. And they had a 5.5% increase on the year last year, and they're expecting it to be far ahead of that next year. They expect 11% increase this year. The year just ended in housing in England. It was higher in the United States. It was 20%. So you can't wait around. Meanwhile, will it get better? Well, I'm looking at the markets this morning, and abroad, markets are mixed. A little bit up in Germany, a little bit up in France, like 0.05%, nothing big. A little bit down in England. They don't know what Putin's going to do, but oil is back up to $93. So Putin did not send up the flares that they're going home. And by not sending up the flares that they're going home, they are increasing the likelihood that they're not going home. He likes this $93 a barrel. And what Mike Pompeo said last night about oil markets was so on spot. They had former Secretary of State Pompeo on with Brett Baer before I was on Special Report. I want to go back through the Pompeo cuts because he's got his finger exactly on it. This is the most substantive exchange on Ukraine and Putin in the United States. It's between Brett Baer and Mike Pompeo last night, cut 23.
Well, Brett, it's hard to go wrong with that Reagan aphorism. I might add distrust but verify. I heard Putin today speaking, acting as if he was the peacemaker when he was, in fact, the person who brought all this current kerfuffle on. We shouldn't credit him for now making a statement that says, well, maybe it's time for me to negotiate and I'll pull some of my troops back. You know, the other thing we need to make sure to keep in mind, Brett, is that it's not binary. We talked about it, invasion or not. In fact, we saw the cyber attacks today. We'll see where they actually came from. But Vladimir Putin's been at war with the West for an awfully long time, and in Ukraine in particular. Can't forget he took 1/5 of that country just a handful of years ago. So we're always caught up in just the moment. We were working so hard at this, Brett. I met with my counterpart many, many times, Mr. Narishkin at the SVR, met with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin thanked me and President Trump for saving lives in St. Petersburg. We always knew that you needed to make sure and have good conversations, develop whatever level of relationship you could, work together. If you can save lives in a place like Russia, you ought to do that. But when you came to defending America's interests, we were pretty clear we were going to do that every single day.
And he kept going. Let's go to cut number 24 of Pompeo with Brett Baer.
It's unfortunate that you see a partisan, frankly, unfounded comment like that. I promise you, you had the NATO Secretary General on just a little bit ago. I know Secretary General Stoltenberg very well. He was thankful for what President Trump did, for what our administration did. We flowed resources to NATO. We made each country stand up and prepare better to defend itself. Secretary General Stoltenberg is much more capable, and his force is more capable today because of what the Trump administration did. Now, it's precisely opposite. When you coddle, when you say, look, this is no longer important, we're going to turn inward, we're going to lead from behind, that was the wrong approach. it shouldn't be partisan. We want a strong, united NATO. We want to make sure that the things that matter to people in Nevada and across the United States of America are stood up for. And protecting a democracy in Ukraine is something we ought to do for our own best interest. I'd add one more thought here, Brett. I heard President Biden say that he's worried about American energy prices because of something that Russia does. In fact, American energy prices are high today because of what President Biden has done. He's shut down the capacity for America to produce its own affordable energy. Don't let any leader hide behind what some other actor does. America can have affordable, safe, abundant energy from its own internal resources. We demonstrated that in our 4 years.
That's a presidential campaign right there. You are paying $5.05 a gallon in California because of Joe Biden, not because of Vladimir Putin. Then Brett Baer turns to the panel, Mara Liasson from NPR, Tom Bevan from Real Clear, and me to talk about Ukraine. Let's play the entire cut number 26.
Let's bring in our panel. Syndicated radio host Hugh Hewitt, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and president. Hugh, where we stand today, is it much different than where we stood yesterday?
There's a head fake underway, Brett. I had Senator Dan Sullivan on my radio show this morning, and he said head fake, he doesn't believe Putin. I agree with what former Secretary of State Pompeo told you at the start of the show. Distrust and verify everything the Russians say they are doing. And the good news is the president gave a very good statement today. Not 1 inch of a NATO country can be invaded without triggering the defensive response of every NATO country, so we should give props to the president for clarity on that. But the bad and the ugly is, why are we rushing arms to Ukraine at this late minute? It's not like this is a surprise that Putin has been menacing the country since 2014. And the ugly part is he's actually played the last 4 administrations, including Trump's, pretty well in terms of surprising us all the time. At some point, we're going to figure out Putin is a mafia-like figure who's running a gas station, to quote Tom Cotton this morning, but we haven't figured it out yet.
It just seems to me
the White House
that the most obvious part of this entire crisis is that Putin knows that gas is going to $100, oil is going to $100 a barrel when he does this. And the only way to stop that, and so there's an incentive for him to do it. If you walk down the street, if you drive your car and you park your car in front of your neighbor's house and annoy him, and you get paid $100 more a day, are you going to do that? So Putin is annoying us. He's got the world on edge. He's got markets jittery, and oil has gone to its $93 a barrel. And that's because we stopped making oil in the United States. We stopped importing it from Canada. We shut down Keystone Pipeline. We made it difficult to frack on public lands. We gave him the incentive to take it to the next level. As long as we had elasticity in the market by our production, he couldn't do this. He wouldn't even have a financial. He might have the Greater Russia incentive. He might want to become Tsar Vlad the First, but I don't know. Was there a Tsar Vlad the First already? I'm not sure. That might be what he really wants. But I know one thing he does want is $93 a barrel oil, because he gets 1 out of 10 of those barrels that are worldwide. He hated it when oil was at $40 a barrel. Hated it during early COVID. Russia, the oligarchs, the people who could actually get a shot off at him. He's not living in a garden club. He's surrounded by thugs and killers. And if they lose their money and they get sanctioned, they're going to kill him. That's the way the Kremlin works. When Beria comes in one morning, if you don't know who that name is, go look it up. And Stalin's looking at him funny. It's a bad day for Beria. And it was a bad day for millions of people who were sent to the Gulag. Russia, gangsters do gangster stuff. And Vladimir Putin is a gangster. And he's a czar gangster. But the one thing gangsters do is they have to make money to keep the machine going. So he's making money. And what Pompeo said, and I want to underscore, is that we could hurt him the most by throwing everything at the XL pipeline. But the same people who got recalled from the school board in San Francisco last night are running the American energy policy. You have to understand, in America, the hard left has taken over the Democratic Party. Joe Biden, clueless, distracted, disoriented, often simply tired and worn down, cannot control his party controls him, and that's the problem with Putin. Dick in Dayton, what do you say, Dick?
Morning, Hugh.
Good morning.
I just wanted to say that I thought we had a good Super Bowl, but All right, being from Cleveland, I'm thinking next week the Browns can go there, buddy.
It's next year for the Browns, and I'm here to tell you that Baker would have won that game. Just remember that, Dick. You're down in Bengals land. You're not in the free state of Ohio. You're in southern Ohio, but the free state of Ohio also comes with the land, Neo. We know Baker would have won that game. Don't go anywhere, America. 1-800-520-1234 connects you to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment.
I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Operations, you find that they have this concept that loosely translated English means big help with a little bad mouth. And basically what that means is they're willing to allow people they do deals with in Congress, the Biden family, on Capitol Hill, Wall Street. They're willing to allow those individuals to provide some criticism because they recognize that it maintains credibility for those individuals.
Wow.
What they don't want, Dennis, is for them to sort of go to the third rail, which is number one, cut off Chinese access to Western capital markets and restrict the flow of technology, not stolen technology, but technology given to China. They don't want those two elements stopped.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Was Sonia Sotomayor saying to them that there were 100,000 children in hospitals, many of them on ventilators? Eric, I went and looked up the data immediately. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've posted regularly the death rates of COVID positive people and heart disease and cancer. There are only 119,000 people hospitalized for COVID in the nation as we sat there that day. So you're saying 100,000 of them were children when the data shows that only 5 children are hospitalized out of every 100,000 hospitals.
With what's trending, subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. No breaking news yet on Putin. We're watching and waiting, watching and waiting. Let me play for you Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He's had it with the masks. Canada is going into martial law. Scott Trudeau must be liked by 1 in 3 Canadians, and the other 2 think he's nuts or just a child. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford came out and gave a statement that I like. Cut number 20.
You know, you can go to Costco, you can go to Walmart, you can go shopping. You know, you don't know if the person has a shot beside you or not, but we also know that it doesn't matter if you have 1 shot or 10 shots, you can catch COVID. See, the Prime Minister has triple shots, and I know hundreds of people with 3 shots that caught COVID. We just have to be careful. We've got to always make sure we wash our hands and move forward. But, Colin, we can't stay in this position forever. We got to learn to live with this and get on with our lives. I bet if I asked every single person in this room, do you want these damn masks or do you want them off? They want them off. They want to get back to normal. They want to be able to go for dinner with their families. And there's every single person, including myself, knows people that are unvaccinated. You know, sure, there's the rebel rousers, and then there's just hardworking people that just don't believe in it. And that's their choice. This is about, again, a democracy and freedoms and liberties. And I hate as a government telling anyone what to do. We just got to get moving forward and get out of this and protect the jobs. You know, I think a lot of people call them, probably yourself too, everyone's done with us. Like, we are done with it. Let's start moving on and cautiously. And, you know, we've followed the rules, all of us, like 90% of us, for over 2 years. The world's done with it. So let's just move forward.
Yeah, let's just move forward indeed. I'm looking at the Morning Consult poll. This is published, Josh Kroshauer has put it over at Twitter. In the Morning Consult, very reputable, I think slightly left-leaning poll. They had some pretty funny results last time around. None of the pollsters covered themselves in glory, not even Trafalgar. And the president's approval rating is at 39%. 39%. Can he go to 30? It's possible. That reflects just a general realization that his policies are screwed up and his capacity is limited. Rich in Pittsburgh. Good morning, Rich. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Morning, Hugh. Hey, I just want to say that we have a lot of races this coming fall. You've had Pennsylvania Senate candidates on your show already. We have to take every race and unite, because what you said earlier about the Democratic Party, I don't care if the Democrat's running as moderate. He's not. She's not. And like you said, it's the way the party's moving, and that's the way every candidate's going to vote as a Democrat. So we have to take and unite in November, and whoever the candidate is, get behind that Republican candidate, because we can work with Republicans in the Senate, in the House, and as a governor, but we cannot work with the Democrats. I
agree. There are some Republicans I can't work with. I mean, if Eric Greitens gets the nomination, I'm not going to have him on. I'm not going to tell you to vote for a Democrat, but the guy's going to lose. And your 3 candidates, all of them, the leading candidates in the Pennsylvania Senate race, they're all fine people. And so it doesn't matter who wins. Great people. Yeah, whether it's Carlos Sands or Dave McCormick or Jeff Bartok, it doesn't matter. All 3 of them will win Pennsylvania. And so I'm here to be an honest broker. But when I see a lost leader, I know Democrats are going to pour money into nominating Greitens. It's what they do in Missouri. They nominated Todd Aitken, who lost that seat to Claire McCaskill, and we had to wait for Josh Hawley to come along and win it back. Well, Ron Blunt is retiring, and if we nominate Eric Greitens, who's a weird guy and a bad guy with a bad record, we will lose Missouri. So what do you think we should do in that case, Rich? Oh, he's gone.
We can't lose Missouri, though.
I know. So what do we got? You got to tell everyone, do not vote for Greitens. I don't care who of the 5 other people you vote for. Don't vote for Greitens.
I'd rather have a Senator Romney and have a 50-50 tie.
You and me and both. You and me both.
Exactly. Do me.
But I'll tell you what. If you start nominating people who the public thinks are sex offenders, then your party is going to get hurt. Eric Greitens really is the disaster out there in 2022. Everybody else is fine. Some of them are more like me and some are less like me, but they're all fine Republicans. Eric Greitens is the only radioactive candidate I've seen. Hey, thank you, Rich. Coming right back. New member of the Intel Committee. Clearly does not require football knowledge to go on to it. Congressman Mike Gallagher next.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Was Sonia Sotomayor saying to them that there were 100,000 children in hospitals, many of them on ventilators? Eric, I went and looked up the data immediately. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've posted regularly the death rates of COVID-positive people and heart disease and cancer. There are only 119,000 people hospitalized for COVID in the nation as we sat there that day. So you're saying 100,000 of them were children when the data shows that only 5 children are hospitalized out of every 100,000 hospitalizations. There was maybe 6 kids in the hospital, none of them on ventilators that I could find.
6, 100,000. Who's counting? Hey, we're all about
this is the
all
problem.
about grace. We're all about grace,
and
bro.
it's a whole consistent pattern, Eric, that they used to do kind of in the shade. They would make more implications than direct statements. They wouldn't campaign on things that were factually false. The left has lost its rooting, its mooring, anything that's holding it,
But how many
tethering it to
people
reality.
do we know in the evangelical church who do not give a damn about this? They absolutely don't seem to understand that when leaders lie, when they do these kinds of things, it hurts people. It usually hurts poor people the most. And we have many in the evangelical church who have absolutely turned a blind eye. Again, this rises to levels unprecedented in American life. I mean, it's one thing to say we have differences. This is a level of political theater, of lying and grandstanding that is so pernicious to the fabric of the republic.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands,
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Streaming on Salem now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our
Our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you.
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast today, joined by Congressman Michael Gallagher, now a member of the vaunted House Intelligence Committee. Since last I spoke to you, you were in, am I correct about that, Congressman? You are now on House Intel.
You are correct, Hugh. I am.
Okay, first question then. And you got all the clearances, and you got to get read into all the SCIF stuff and all the different classifications and compartmentalized information segments. You got all the pieces of the pie?
Yeah, the first thing you do is you get a brief on whatever directed energy weapon is making the Browns play so poorly on the field every week. I can't go into further details about that, Hugh. It's highly classified, but it's out there. The truth
I know that the first thing you asked is, why did Brett Favre not go for it in last year's AFC Championship game? Tell me the truth here. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, and the answer is because he has been retired for a while. Now, Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand.
Aaron Rodgers has been retired. Oh, that's right. What am I saying? Aaron Rodgers.
Brett Favre.
Gosh. Well, that is a good thing. How many members are Intel?
There is about 8 Republicans and 10 Democrats, rough off the back.
Now, tell me how the committee actually worked. Former Secretary of State Pompeo, who used to hold this seat after former House member Tom Cotton, now Senator Cotton, held it after John Campbell, after Dave Dreyer. You're 5th in a row. He was an Intel member, too. I think Cotton might have been an Intel member, so it's really kind of a deal to be on the Intel committee and come on the Hugh Hewitt Show weekly. But what goes into that?
Well, it's unique among the committees in Congress because the majority leader, or the minority leader in this case, gets to appoint people to the committee. The steering committee does not vote on it. It's solely a decision made by Kevin McCarthy, and then on the Democrat side, it is the Speaker's sole discretion to appoint the Democrats on the committee. So that's what makes it unique. It's a permanent select committee. We, as you alluded to earlier, get access to certain information that even those on national security committees, like the Armed Services Committee, don't. And I think the main thing, however, is what used to distinguish the committee was that it was a place to do serious, sober, bipartisan oversight of the intelligence community in particular and the national security community more broadly. Now, unfortunately, under the leadership of Adam Schiff, the Intelligence Committee became, for an unfortunate time, the Impeachment Committee. But I can tell you that Ranking Member Mike Turner from Ohio, leader and soon-to-be Speaker Kevin McCarthy are committed to restoring the intelligence community to that serious, sober role of doing oversight of the intelligence community, particularly in light of the threat posed by China. We have serious intelligence collection problems as it pertains to China. We've had public revelations in recent years that our human source network in particular has been literally killed in China. The CIA is leading an effort to rebuild our cadre of China expertise. These are serious issues we need to dig into in order to keep the country safe. And that is what Kevin McCarthy and Mike Turner are committed to doing. And I'm very excited to be a small part of that. I was obviously a human intelligence, counterintelligence officer in a prior life, and I hope to bring that experience I have of doing intelligence collection in the military to the committee.
Now, Congressman Turner is a Buckeye. He's from Dayton. That means an Air Force guy. It means he's a Bengals guy. So he's got the Ohio thing going for him. He's got some, grounding in reality. He's not going to fly off the handle at anyone very serious and sober. He has a sports blind spot. Do you get along with him? Does he know that you're nuts about Green Bay and you live there and all that kind of stuff?
We get along very well. We've worked together on the Armed Services Committee for the past 5 years. And Mike is really an expert when it comes to strategic issues, i.e. nuclear issues. He chaired the Strategic Forces Subcommittee on the Armed Services Subcommittee, as well as all things Europe. I can't think of another member of Congress who understands just the alliance structure in Europe, the peculiar issues related to NATO better than Turner. He also is a very sort of team-oriented person and really wants to leverage the unique expertise of everybody on the committee. So I think he's a perfect person for that role, and it's, in my mind, inevitable that he will be chairman when we take back the majority. I got to tell you, Hugh, on that front, we are just really kicking butt in terms of recruiting very talented veterans to run for office in Congress. And I think they're going to come in and they're going to hit the ground running on all these national security committees, armed services, intel, and they're going to be part of this effort to get Congress back in the game when it comes to national security and get our entire government serious and ready to confront the long-term threat posed by China.
Yeah, I tell everyone, if I'm recruiting, from the jump, if I'm looking for a member of Congress, I want them under 40 and a veteran, preferably in combat, preferably deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, preferably in the intel business or the special operations business or frontline troops, because I just believe it's the new great generation. However, we do want Ohioans in the lead. Let me ask you about since you've joined, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Have you had any briefings on Russia and Ukraine?
No, I got put on the committee with 1 day left in session, and we had one briefing on Iran that was classified, but we have yet to have briefings on Russia.
So I'm curious. We have a war in the offing, a war that will require immediate, expedited response if, as President Biden put it yesterday, 1 inch of NATO territory is violated. And they're awfully damn close. And a missile can go awry. And all of a sudden we're into Article 5 stuff. And it goes. And you haven't had a briefing? Is that a deficit in your view on the Intel Committee?
Well, I will say we did have a briefing on the Armed Services Committee. We had a broader briefing to the entire conference, as well as Democrats and Republicans. However, there's just limits to what you can get into in that setting versus a smaller setting at a higher level of classification. That being said, what's interesting to me is I think this crisis in particular, in a way similar to the Syrian civil war prior to this, shows how much open source analysis is allowing even those who don't have access to classified information to track Russian troop deployments and movements in near real time. And so I almost don't think you need some sort of secret briefing to understand how serious Vladimir Putin is about invading. I don't really buy this story that came out yesterday that somehow he's pulling back. I don't see any evidence based on Russian troop movements around Ukraine that is credible at all. And unfortunately, this White House has yet again been caught flat-footed. They've been unable or unwilling to act with speed and urgency. They keep hiding behind this idea that deterrence only works if you threaten to impose sanctions after the fact. That betrays a complete naivety and ignorance about basic power relations and basic concepts underpinning deterrence. And so I think we've done almost nothing to convince Putin that he will face very serious costs if he proceeds. Speaking of Mike Turner, as well as Mike Rogers, the ranking member and soon-to-be chair of the Armed Services Committee, they introduced a bill yesterday that I'm on that actually would impose costs right now, sanctioning Putin's cronies and enablers before Russia further invades, reinstating the Nord Stream 2 sanctions so that project doesn't go forward, as well as in critically denying exports of semiconductor technology to the Russian Federation by applying something called the Foreign Direct Product Rule. Now, from there, you can hold in reserve a series of other actions in the case that Putin does invade. For example, Macron was actually talking about putting INF non-compliant missiles, intermediate-range missiles, in NATO countries by revising the 1997 NATO-Russia founding pact if Putin invades. That strikes me as a very sensible threat to make to Putin if he invades. There's a lot of things you can do, but we need to start imposing costs now, and we need to ensure the Ukrainians have some combat credibility on the ground. And our entire process of arming Ukraine has been a complete mess, Hugh.
By the way, it's a bipartisan mess. I want people to understand this. I told people yesterday, because I briefed a couple of people from the Trump years, Mark Esper slow-walked aid for 2.5 years or a year and a half, whatever his tenure was, because he was afraid of the aid getting lost. And there was not just Esper, but civilians in the Pentagon didn't want to send over the javelins. They sat in boxes. They were afraid of the wrong people getting them. Putin has played us through 4 administrations. In Georgia under W stopped him. Of course, he snapped up Crimea and part of Ukraine in 2014 under President Obama. Got the aid slow-walked through 4 years with Trump. We did get some over there, and then Biden stopped and started again. We are a mess. We do not know how to deal with a gangster.
And Hugh, this really is something we need to dig into on the Armed Services Committee. I'm just afraid the Democrats don't want to do any serious investigation or oversight that might embarrass the Biden administration, but it is a bipartisan failure, and we need to understand if this was a consequence of specific individuals and personalities in the Pentagon or the State Department slow-walking assistance, the White House slow-walking it, or whether it's just a reflection of how bloated and slow our national security bureaucracy has become. In the same way, I think just the general bureaucracy combined with White House ambivalence and naivety contributed to our fiasco and failure in Afghanistan. But as a great power, as the world's superpower, we need to be able to provide assistance much more quickly than we're doing right now.
Speaking of Afghanistan, a sidebar, John Androzek was over to the House last night. Blood on my hands, John Androzek, helping the evacuation effort still of American citizens, dependents, and SIVs. And I said when he gets back to D.C. next, he has to sit down with you. I know he sat down with a bunch of members. He likes talking to the veterans. I had Sullivan, by the way, Dan Sullivan, another Marine on yesterday. He said it's a head fake. Putin's involved in a head fake. And then I got a note from one of my NATO buddies saying it's going off tonight. It didn't go off last night, but they're clearly not buying this stuff. Here's a sentence from my Washington Post column this morning, Congressman Gallagher. If Ukraine is pummeled quickly, it will be in large part on the failure of Esper and his team to deliver the weapons and training that to our ally that Trump and Congress authorized. Like Trump's long-promised expansion of the fleet, everything about lethal aid for Ukraine became a slog through the bog of Esper's Pentagon. That's based on report. I want people to know, I will hit the Republicans on this. We have just utterly failed to act with any kind of urgency with Ukraine through 3 presidencies.
It's a serious problem. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that Putin has designs on Ukraine. I mean, this has been happening since 2014. This has been a modern-day laboratory for hybrid warfare that Putin's perfecting, and she is observing as this goes down. And we're going to see some very interesting things, Hugh. I mean, on both sides, right? Because the Russians are going to be going up against armed UAVs. That's going to be an interesting military problem. But I just can't emphasize enough how much I think Xi Jinping is going to school on this whole thing. We know the Russians and Chinese released a 5,000-word joint statement a couple of weeks ago promising endless friendship and no limits to their cooperation. This is a very dangerous moment. And finally, Hugh, I just want to commend, I listened to your interview with Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan, my Marine brother, is one of the smartest national security voices right now. And
he's from Ohio, too.
Connect to this crisis. Well, there you go.
There you go.
His ability to connect this with the terrible energy policy of the Biden administration is a point too many people are missing, and he was spot on with that.
He was. Now, okay, next week, Area 51 with Intel committee member Mike Gallagher. Is that a promise, Congressman?
Yeah, that's a promise, Hugh.
I want to know where the Green Bay football fans' hopes went. I think it's Area 51, so we'll find out about that next week with Congressman Rep. Gallagher Rep Gallagher, now on Intel. The regular guest slot on the Hugh Hewitt Show it's been a blessing to those who've occupied it, even though they don't know much about sports. I do want to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. Gallagher needs it because he runs a mile a day. Mike gets out there and he does a mile. It doesn't matter what the weather is. It can be 50 degrees, 60 degrees, 70 degrees. If it's lower than 50, it doesn't go. If it's higher than 70, but if it's between 50 and 70, he will get a mile in because of ReliefFactor.com. He told me that. ReliefFactor.com, 1995. Even Gallagher moves. Even Wisconsin people. Wisconsin people are very sedentary. Very, very sedentary. And they got to move. They're like the GB Packers offense. They just sit there. But they need to move. That's why we got to get them. ReliefFactor.com, 1995 gets you started. Gallagher needs a package. He'll be back next week. Coming right back, America. Do not go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Wesbury's next. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. Yesterday we talked about the Durham probe on Special Report with Brett Baer. First, let's listen to that segment, cut number 27.
What about that? We're back with the panel, Hugh, Mara, and Tom. We're also joined by Andrew McCarthy, former assistant United States attorney. Andy, I want to start with you and address some of, what we saw from some of that coverage, which is it's just not there and they don't see it. And what about that?
Well, I think there ought to be a lot more coverage, Brett, because it's very alarming. But you do have to keep reminding yourself that the only thing that Durham has alleged at this point is in connection with Michael Sussman, the Democratic Party connected lawyer. The only thing he's alleged is that he misled the FBI about who his clients were. He hasn't even alleged that the information that they brought to him was in any way fraudulent, although it's been suggested that it's misleading. And Durham is operating from a premise that the government officials were duped, not that they were in on it. I think if you're going to have a Watergate-style, bonanza of a conspiracy, and we'll have to see what Durham's final product looks like, but you would think that the government officials in that kind of an arrangement would be driving the train. And here what Durham is basically saying is that they were saps.
Yeah. But Andy, when you look at that filing, what's, number one, most troubling to you? And number two, how do you read it? Is this an effort to get Sussman to help and assist and go bigger?
Well, any prosecutor wants to have somebody cooperate and go higher. So that's kind of always thrumming in the mix. But what I see, Brett, is that, there's an interesting allegation that's made, but it doesn't change the underlying facts of the case. And from Sussman's perspective, at least from what his lawyers are saying, they think it's a weak false statements case because it's only Sussman and the FBI's general counsel in the room. So it's one guy's recollection against the others. It's not transcribed. It's not recorded. And they think that James Baker, the FBI's general counsel, has made different versions of what happened on different occasions.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal has this. Trump really was spied on. White House communications are supposed to be secure. The notion that any contractor, much less one with ties to a presidential campaign, could access them is alarming enough. The implication that the data was exploited for a political purpose is a scandal that requires investigation under oath. The unfolding information underscores that the Russia collusion story was one of the dirtiest tricks in U.S. political history. Mr. Durham should tell the whole sordid story. And Hugh, the question is, will he and when?
Well, it depends on Mr. Sussman. It seems to me that the analogy that Sussman is, he's either going to be John Dean, who was the desk officer for Watergate, who rolled over and made a deal with the prosecutors and brought everyone down, or he's going to be G. Gordon Liddy, and the only people who are going to get penalized for this are him and Perkins' partners who are going to have to pay any liability. But if Sussman doesn't say anything, I think what Andy just said about the fact that it's a one-on-one conversation with the FBI general counsel in a weak false statements case, right now, Sussman is staying very strong, silent, and pushing back. So I just don't have a lot of optimism that this goes big unless he rolls over like John Dean did and rat everyone out.
Yeah.
We don't even know if there's anything to rat out about. And so I'm just telling everyone who's excited about Durham, I am glad he's there.
That's the problem.
It's the tip of the iceberg, I hope, but we do not know. And he did not indict the technology executive. He did not. He brought additional facts before the court having to do with conflicts of interest among law firms and who can represent Mr. Sussman. Mr. Sussman appears to be ironclad, stuck in the mud. But let's see if that isn't changing. There's a lot more that could be added to a False Statement Act claim. And it's a short segment with Brett, and he had to get to the rest of the panel. But what Andy McCarthy says, it's a weak case. Take that to the bank. He is a former assistant United States attorney. He prosecuted successfully the blind sheikh. He is the smartest criminal law guy out there. He's the only guy I actually listen to seriously because he covers the waterfront. He stays attention. If he says it's a weak case, it is a weak case. I also want to go to Mike McCall, who is the head of Homeland Security, now ranking member, cut number 9, talking to Harris Faulkner on Fox.
Well, it reminds me of Chamberlain and Hitler. Weakness invites aggression. He's projecting weakness after Afghanistan. We lost Bagram, our eyes and ears on the ground for Russia, China, Iran. Now President Xi in China he's watching this very closely to see, can I invade Taiwan and get away with this? All the while, our negotiators are in Vienna negotiating with the Ayatollah on an Iranian nuclear bomb. Now, if that doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what would.
He's right. Keep going. Cut number 10, Mike McCall.
That's a toboggan run, right? Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, Secretary of Defense Gates was correct. He's been wrong on every foreign policy decision for the last 3 decades. He's wrong on this one. And to underestimate Putin's desire to take over the Ukraine would be the largest invasion since World War II in Europe. It is a very big foreign policy failure. I would argue this all started in Afghanistan, and Putin saw weakness, and then waiving the sanctions on Nord Stream 2 to allow Putin to build his pipeline into Europe. Massive foreign policy mistakes. And now,
boy, when we get the House, we are going to be so much better with Mike McCall running Homeland Security and Gallagher on Intel. I mean, we just need them. We got to get rid of this stupid select committee, January 6th committee that nobody trusts. Lots ahead. Stay tuned. It's Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple of reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I will get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out. And we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this. I'll bet that within his administration, there is very nasty fighting because they see what we see. I'm sure Kamala Harris despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet. But it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
The Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Could you let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long? I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot, and how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since 1st grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing. And we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD school board. We went down and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
America, bonjour, hi, Canada, Hugh Hewitt. And to all of my 470 affiliates, you should know Katie Pavlich by now. She's been running around Town Hall and Fox News for a decade. Katie is one of our wonder workers who will be working these vineyards long after I've retired in a decade. Katie, welcome back. How are you?
Great, Hugh. Thanks so much for having me on.
I tell everyone, there's a whole group of young people in Town Hall who are going to be doing this for so long it makes my head hurt. But given the pace at which you have to work. In the old days when there wasn't the inner tubes, you could get through a week of radio with like 5 articles. That doesn't cut it anymore, Katie. Are you ready for the new world and keeping this pace up?
I mean, I think that we've learned from the best, which is you, Hugh Hewitt, in terms of managing time and always working and packing as much as possible into a day. So we have good mentors that we can follow to get ready for this new breakneck pace that we're at in the internet.
It's a completely different journalism. I've got Scott Lehigh, who's a lefty columnist from the Boston Globe, coming on at the bottom of the hour, and he's an old guy like me, so we'll go at a regular pace, and we won't get winded. But Katie, I want to ask you about Durham, because I followed Durham out of the corner of my eye, and so it comes up last night on Special Report, and you do Special Report a lot, do a lot of Fox, and I'm following it through Andy McCarthy, because I haven't got time for everything. I've got a lot of time for Ukraine and a lot of time for the Chinese communists, but I haven't got a lot of time for Durham until he gives me something. What do you think is going on?
Well, I think that, John Durham, to many people's, frustration, has been taking a very long time to get through this special counsel investigation. And I think we should remember that thanks to Attorney General Bill Barr, he is a special counsel, making it more difficult for the Biden administration to get rid of him once they came into office. And so in terms of what he's doing now, I think he's just being very methodical about going through the FBI's investigation of the Trump campaign, looking into very detailed specifics about, servers and who was doing what, and really honing in on what the Clinton campaign was doing. Because for so long, as you know, through Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation, throughout the Trump administration, the Clinton campaign really didn't get much scrutiny. There wasn't a lot about the Clinton campaign in the special counsel investigation from Robert Mueller. John Durham's entire job is to take a look at the whole picture when it came to 2016. And I think he's finding that a lot of what was said about President Trump and the details of what the lawyers were doing and the attorneys was pretty sketchy, to say the least, and in a lot of ways may have broken the law, because, of course, it's his job to look at the criminality of all of this. So we now know that the executive office of the president was being monitored or looked at. We know that Trump Tower and President Trump's other residence was being closely monitored by the Clinton campaign. And, of course, this narrative about the Russia collusion came from the very same people. Now, how is this relevant to the current times and Joe Biden? Well, the National Security Advisor for President Joe Biden just happens to be someone who came up with this whole narrative about Russia. And, of course, when he's dealing with issues like Russia and Ukraine, you have to ask questions about, what we can trust when he is speaking.
When you use a lawyer, I brought this up to Brett last night. I don't expect people to remember John Dean. Joseph Alsop or Stuart Alsop, one of the two, called him a bottom-dwelling slug. He was the White House counsel, and he was the desk officer for the cover-up, self-described, of Watergate. And when Dean flipped, it all fell down. All right, so Dean said, this guy's guilty, that guy's guilty, that gal's involved. This guy, yeah, he did it all. He was the roadmap. And the sussman is John Dean. But Sussman seems to me to be acting like G. Gordon Liddy, who, love him or hate him, never said a word. What do you think Sussman's going to be?
Well, given who he's working for, the Clintons, I would assume that he wants to act like Liddy rather than speaking, right? So, the wheels of justice turn slowly, especially in these situations where there's a lot of research to do on what happened. Especially, and it makes it much harder if people are ignoring subpoenas or not giving information to investigators or lying to investigators, which is the accusation in some of these cases in the Durham probe. But my bet would be that he doesn't say much, that they fight back. The Clinton campaign is already saying that they're going to fight back against these allegations, dragging this thing out even further. And, I doubt there will be much accountability, Hugh, given the way that things happen in Washington.
Don't get your hopes up. That's what I just tell people.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it doesn't mean they shouldn't look at it and continue.
And hope.
And again, Bill Barr deserves credit for making Durham a special counsel rather than just, an investigator so that he has more protection. But in terms of indictments for people like Hillary Clinton, we'll have to wait and see. But
it's going to take a long time to get anywhere productive. I just want people to be patient. Now, Katie, I want to turn. You are my resident Second Amendment expert, and you actually know weaponry. I mean, you get it. You know guns. There's a case going up to the Supreme Court, New York Rifle and Pistol Association. Some people think it'll be mooted out. I think that the court is going to move to establish a standard of review for state and local laws regulating the possession of firearms. I am optimistic that that standard will be good. I am even, maybe Breyer will join to get a decision. What do you think? Are you following the case? I know you're not a lawyer, but I know you are a skilled Second Amendment spokesperson. What do you think is going to happen in this case?
Well, I do know that the Supreme Court hasn't taken up a case on the Second Amendment in quite a long time.
Correct.
And there are issues not just in New York about there's a lot of questions about what local ordinances can do about concealed carry, for example. You've seen the situation in Washington, D.C., where they had to choose one or the other. You couldn't ban both concealed carry and open carry. You had to choose one, and you can't just say that there's this high standard for issuing of the right to bear arms, depending on where you live and whether you have threats against your life. And so we've seen precedent before that is in favor of people having the right to keep and bear arms outside of their homes, and that the government doesn't have a right to decide the cause for why they want to keep and bear arms. And we've seen around the country a lot of different local ordinance, whether it's in parks or at city events, where they have decided to ban lawfully acquired concealed carry permits from the state. So this, of course, goes to a Supreme Court level, and whether the Second Amendment applies, whether you're in a city park or whether you're, just existing inside the country and under the Constitution. So I think a lot of gun rights activists are excited to see the Supreme Court take this up. It's been a long time since a case like this has come before the court, and given the makeup of the court, I think people are quite confident that it will go in favor of the Second Amendment rather than against.
When I'm up on the northern border and somewhat alone, I will be armed and I will be taught how to use what I'm getting. My question is, right now you don't want me around a weapon. I haven't shot a gun since camp, right? Since I was 14, so that's 50 years ago, and I didn't hit the target. Couldn't see anything. I didn't have glasses
basic
then.
Safety will get you started.
That's it. Well, I got a Marine Corps colonel brother-in-law. I said, you're not going anywhere without me for a long time. But in any event, Katie, the key question is, I know the con law. The con law is it's an individual right. We haven't established a standard of review for local and state laws. Mm-hmm. If that standard of review becomes the same, it can't be strict scrutiny or every law goes away, and we don't want people to have machine guns. At least I don't. I don't know about you. I don't want to speak for you. But I want people to be able to have a carry permit if they want a carry permit and they're reasonable. It's very, very easy. That's called intermediate scrutiny. Would you accept that as a guns right activist, perhaps the most articulate gun right activist in America? And that's a high honor, and it's deserved for Katie Pavlich. Would you accept something that says, if there's a compelling reason and you can prove it, we will allow the local restriction or the state restriction to stand?
I would not accept that. I don't think the Second Amendment is limited to where you live. And,
you want strict scrutiny.
Yes, I think that the Second Amendment applies to everywhere you are. It should not matter what city or district you're in to limit that right. We don't,
so if
we don't limit the First Amendment, just depending on whether you're going into a city park or not. We shouldn't limit the Second either.
Okay, what about a local law that only you can have concealed carry, you can have open carry, you can carry everywhere you want. You can buy ammunition at the 7-Eleven, and we got a gun store next door. I mean, Kurt Schlichter's world. If we've got that, but you may not bring a loaded weapon into an elementary school. This is on the heels of the $1 million settlement in Sandy Hook. Is that a constitutional law?
Well, I think that the Sandy Hook situation is quite different than lawful gun owners who have...
No, I'm not talking about... I'm just talking about that law. Can we prohibit a private citizen from carrying a weapon into an elementary school?
Well, it just depends. There's a lot of religious institutions like synagogues and churches, for example, that also have a daycare or a kindergarten or a school attached to it, and they want to make sure that
got one around the corner from me. Yep, I got a Jewish day school that is...
Make sure that those kids are protected from people who want to do them harm, so it gets a little more complicated than just
I've got the finest Jewish day school around the corner from me, and I'm sure that they got Mossad guys on the walls if anyone goes near there. I'm sure they do. But we'll come back again, Katie. Think about this, because they got to come up with a standard if they want 8 votes. And I would like an 8-1 vote upholding the right to bear arms and having a degree of scrutiny that may be between intermediate and rational. We got to have something. Can't be ollie in free, I don't think. But we'll find out more. Katie Pavlich on Twitter, at Town Hall. Always a welcome guest. Don't go anywhere. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, why are Republicans not for anything? Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now in the right hands,
Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
that's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Coming up after the break, Scott Lehigh, Boston Globe columnist, man of the left. Should be fun. Let me check markets, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com, great sponsor of the show. The 10-year Treasury bumped above 2% in the course of the program this morning. Started out at 1.905. It's now at 2.045%. That's not a big deal. That will change your interest rate that you get on a 30-year fixed rate by maybe 1/10 of a point. The point is the direction is not good, and you can't sit around. So if you're going to buy a house, go to AndrewandTodd.com. They're Sierra Pacific Mortgage, big outfit. They lend a lot of money, and they do it soup to nuts, and they're straight up with you. And if you want to get done in 30 days, it's possible. It's certainly going to happen under 60 days. If you've got dinged up credit, they'll try and help you. They're honest, good men who I have known for a very long time. Andrew Del Rey and I were in a Bible study together for many years when I lived on the West Coast. And I've known Todd Avakian for a long time, AndrewandTodd.com. Yesterday, the market was very happy. This was brought to you by Sierra Pacific. The Dow was up 422 points. The S&P was up 69. And the NASDAQ skipped up 348 points. This morning, overseas, everything's off a little bit. It's all Putin related, right? This is all Russia. Germany's down 1/10 of a point. France was down 1/12 of a point, 0.12%. And Great Britain is down 0.38%. Way too early to say what's going to happen in the America's markets today. We don't know. It's up to Putin. I had a friend tell me he was going to invade last night, who's in NATO and over there, and didn't invade last night. What he wants to do, I think, is keep the price of oil up there because he sells 1 out of every 10 barrels of oil in the world. I know one thing. Whatever happens in Ukraine, interest rates in the United States are going up in lockstep. And if you're going to buy a house or you're going to refinance a house, do it now. 888-888-1172. Let me talk to Jacob in San Jose. Hi, Jacob. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Yes, Hugh. Is it your belief that the 1990 repeated assurances James Baker, Secretary of State, and other NATO leaders gave to the Soviet Union that if they would agree to the reunification of Germany, that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward?
No, I don't believe that. I know that, in fact, not to be true. That's not true, Jacob. So those assurances were not given. Those assurances were not made, and in 1914, the United States and Russia agreed that the territorial integrity of Ukraine was sacrosanct. Thank you, Jacob. Kelly in New Mexico. What do you say, Kelly?
Hi, Hugh.
Hey, good morning.
By the way, I'm not so sure that Baker Mayfield would have made that.
Baker Mayfield would have made that. They would have gotten that first down. They'd have had a kicker out there. Now, if it was the Browns, we didn't have a kicker like the Bengals did. I'm just saying he would have gotten the first down. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, I have one constitutional legal type of question and one comment. When you ask, all the candidates that you are right now about the 2020 election, I think, like the guy that talked to you yesterday, I think you're not asking the right question, only because I think a lot of us have moved on and we're more concerned about the manipulation. Kind of like Molly Hemingway and
look, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of good stuff on that, but whether Mike Pence was right or Donald Trump was right about what Pence's authority under the Electoral Count Act and the Constitution is a very specific question.
That one is, yeah.
And that's what
won or not.
I think you need to. I think you need to answer that question. And I do not believe anyone can argue that the former president, won 2020. He just didn't. And I mean, that was clear from November, the day after the election, it was clear.
I don't think anybody knows that since we don't know
I do.
What really happened.
I do know he was elected. It's a mortal lock certainty he was elected. And it's not even close, but I appreciate the call. I got to tell people about ReliefFactor.com. The other sponsor of the show that I normally do in the third segment, I'm going to be talking with Scott Lehigh of the Boston Globe and don't want to interrupt the conversation flow. So I'm telling you about ReliefFactor.com right now. $19.95 gets you started. $19.95 gets you running, walking, skiing, canoeing, whatever it is you do. Maybe you're an electric bike enthusiast like Dwayne. And if you're an electric bike enthusiast, I'm not sure you get aches and pains, but you might. Allegedly, it's exercise. Dwayne tells me it's exercise. I just don't know. I'm just telling you that you want to get it. $19.95. You go to ReliefFactor.com, put in my name, Hugh, and just tell them, I'm going to try it like Hewitt does every day. I'm going to try it for 3 weeks, and I've been taking it for 10 years, friends. It's great because I don't take any other natural supplement. One supplement, you'll never hear me selling anything else except that. Scott Lehigh, Boston Globe, next.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out. And we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this. I'll bet that within his administration, there is very nasty fighting because they see what we see. I'm sure Kamala Harris despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet. But it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
the Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughing stock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back and good morning, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast today. Joined now by Scott Lehigh, a columnist for the Boston Globe. Good morning, Scott. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Hugh. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your coming on. I really do. I do appreciate it. You and I have not been on the air before. We have not met. We have never shook hands as far as I know. Am I right?
I believe you're right about that.
So one of the things I do, it's a little bit of a ritual for a first-time guest, is I have a couple of starting questions, but this is an interview, not a debate. I really want to know where Scott Lehigh is coming from and has come from. You've been a columnist with the Globe since '89, am I right?
No, I have been at the Globe since '89. I've been a columnist from 2000, 2001, something like that. Okay. I was a political reporter for a long time, covered a bunch of campaigns, and basically a political guy.
Oh, you and I come out of the same world. I did center right for PBS for 10 years before taking over an opinion job, but news guys. And so, are you a native to Massachusetts?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay. Was it Brady or was it Belichick?
I'm a Brady guy. In fact, my football loyalties gravitated down to Tampa Bay when Tom went there. Brady has, as Howard Cosell once said of Wellington Meyer, or rather Belichick, has the personality of wet cement as far as I'm concerned. I find him sort of surly, and why does anyone care about the coach? I like the players, but now that Tom is gone, I gotta find another team.
Well, the Browns are available. I'm here to tell you picked right on that one because Belichick is unloved in Cleveland, where he ruined the Browns, got them turned into the Ravens, and then got fired. So you've got one thing going for you as we begin this interview. First question to get our GPS on you. I assume that you can say and that you will say that you voted for Joe Biden, for Hillary Clinton, for President Obama twice, for Secretary of State Kerry in 2004, and for Al Gore in 2000. Am I right?
Well, some of those elections I was covering as a reporter, and I sometimes when I was a reporter, I would say I'm not going to vote for this because it would make me think that as you're covering it, you're kind of you get a little tendentious if you've decided who you're going to vote for. But yeah, as a opinion columnist, I mean, yes, did I vote for Biden? Yes, definitely.
And Hillary?
And Hillary. Yes, yeah.
And Obama twice because you're a columnist, right?
2012 and in 2016, yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then John Kerry, you're a columnist if I got it. You might not want to tell me about Al Gore, but you voted for Kerry in 2004, right? You're a Boston guy.
Yeah, Kerry, yes, over Bush, yeah.
Yeah, and I love Boston people. They have the worldview. How long have you lived in the city?
In Boston, oh God, I don't know. When did I come to Boston? I'm in Maine right now, but I came to Boston in the early '80s.
Okay, so I left in 1978, and I've managed to stay out of there except for a reunion since then, because Yastrzemski shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame, and people in the Red Sox community get upset with me. Which part of Maine are you in right now?
I am near Portland right now.
You're on the northern border. I like that. Have you read The Looming Tower?
Near Portland, Maine.
Okay.
It's. I went to high school in Eastport, which is right on the, very close, right across from Canada, right across from Campobello. But no, this is southern Maine now.
Oh, you're a Yankee. You really are a down east guy.
We wouldn't consider it. Mainers don't really consider themselves Yankees. It's funny, and if you live in the South, they consider everyone who lives in the North a Yankee. And if you live in the North, it sort of refers to a specific kind of old-blooded, kind of blue-blooded person.
Oh, I'm just thinking the people that I deal with when I visit my in-laws up in Maine, they're all just kind of flinty, no-nonsense people.
Yeah.
And so
where do you go in Maine?
They live in Freeport. So north of Portland, 40 minutes. And so I've been there often enough. Was Alger Hiss a communist?
Was Alger Hiss a communist? Oh, God. I honestly, I don't even have an opinion on that. You come out of left field in that one.
I have asked every guest who've ever come on whether or not Alger Hiss was a communist spy. Most of them know the answer. Do you not know the answer? Or do you not want to say the answer?
I'm just you just kind of caught me. You flummoxed me on that one. I'd have to go back and look at it.
I love to flummox Boston guys. Flummoxing is what I do best. But Alger Hiss was a communist spy. You got to look that up. Now, just to GPS you, are you pro-reproductive rights?
Do I favor the right to choose abortion? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
and do you own a gun?
I used to. I don't have a gun anymore. No, I used to have a rifle a couple that my dad and my grandfather gave me, but I think they're over at a family place in upstate New York somewhere.
Okay, and are you a churchgoer?
What's that?
Are you a churchgoer?
No.
Okay, so are you an atheist?
I'm not a religious person.
Okay, so but are you an atheist or an agnostic?
I'm probably kind of like a Herbert Spencer agnostic. You familiar with him, the philosopher?
No. Well, I know, is he the Herbert Spencer that government governs best, that governs least? That the economist Herbert Spencer?
Well, I'm thinking more I think this would be the philosopher. He was kind of the considered the great exponent of agnosticism, I think. But that would be kind of where I am.
Okay, well,
I'm not. My religious problems is everyone has well, not everyone, but there are a whole bunch of different beliefs, and I'm not sure any of them should, my beliefs should intrude into your life any more than that your beliefs should intrude into my life.
100%, but I just believe in the free exercise clause, and sometimes people of the left don't. But let's leave that. I got you GPS'd. Now to the subject at hand, the January 6th incident and committee. You wrote a column last week in which I am mentioned, and that's why you came to my attention, and I want to write what you wrote. Former close Trump associate Chris Christie has already signaled his interest in running as an anti-Trump truth-teller in the Republican primaries. Let's call this what it was. January 6th was a riot that was incited by Donald Trump in an effort to intimidate Mike Pence in the Congress, and doing exactly what he said in his own word last week, overturn the election. You're right, Christie said on Sunday's ABC This Week. Those are truths that aren't told inside the red bubble of Trump sycophants and apologists. Indeed, as conservative talk radio host Hugh Hewitt noted in his conversation with Christie, Hewitt never talks about January 6th because if he did, his listeners would tune him out. My first question, did you listen to or read the transcript of that interview?
I listened to the clip. I didn't listen to the whole show. I listened to the clip.
And by the clip, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean the sound that was posted on that part of it, where that was said. That little bit of the conversation.
Okay, let me play for you a 3-minute clip, and then I want to come back to what you said and get your assessment of whether my perspective was accurately presented in your column. I don't think you know this, but let's go ahead and play it. Everybody in elite media, Manhattan Beltway media especially, focused on the censure of Liz Cheney, my friend, and Adam Kinzinger, and they missed entirely the real big deal, which is they adopted rules saying we're not working with the Presidential Debate Commission. I can pretty much guarantee you that that's an issue, and that Liz and Adam are not going to be an issue in the fall of 2022 and in 2024. Why doesn't legacy media cover the big deal, and they only focus on the 9/11 Select Committee, which is actually illegitimate in my view?
Because because what they do, as you know, is they focus on the things that they think will help their cause, and their cause is the cause of the Democratic Party. And so they don't want to talk about the inherent problems with the Presidential Debate Commission and what that's going to lead to in 2024. They'd rather continue to talk about January 6th. Look, Hugh, I have strong feelings about that. I've said them publicly. I said it again today on your show. But enough already. You know, we saw it. It reminds me of the old Marx Brothers routine. You know, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? We all watched January 6th. We all know what happened. And I think that, but for legacy media, what they want to do is continue to push that and push it and push it because they know that that's harmful to Republicans, and they can see that we're moving towards Republican majorities in the House and Senate without something, cataclysmic happening, and that's what they're attempting to cause. And so that's why they do it, and you know it, and so do I.
I do, and I never talk about January 6th because I like my audience. I don't want them to turn me off, and they're bored. They do not like it. It is illegitimate. Nancy Pelosi quashed the minority. And yes, there are 2 Republicans on it. Liz Cheney's been a fine spokesperson for national security for years. I don't know Adam, but they're opposite their party on this. Obviously, I just am curious. Do you think the blue bubble knows how absolutely uninterested America is in the January 6th Select Committee, which is actually a rump parliament gone wild?
No.
So, so Scott, I want to remind the audience what you wrote in the column. Let's call this what it is. January 6th was a riot incited by Donald Trump. You quote Chris Christie, and then you say about me, those are truths that aren't told inside the red bubble of Trump sycophants and apologists. Indeed, as conservative talk show host Hugh Hewitt noted in his conversation with Christie, Hewitt never talks about January 6th because if he did, his listeners would tune him out. Now, having heard the full clip, is that a fair representation of what I was saying?
Yeah, I think so. You were saying, look, if my listeners don't want to hear about this, they wouldn't be listening to me if I talked about it. It seems to me it's very fair, and it seems to me that Christie is kind of
not Christie. Stop for a second, Scott.
No,
did you not hear me say there's a compound sentence? I say its listeners would tune him out, and they are bored. They do not think. I'm clearly talking about the committee, not January 6th. I'm clearly talking about the committee.
Well, you're talking about the investigation of January 6th. You say you don't even want to talk about it.
The committee. I talk about January 6th like every day, and I tell everyone the election was over the day after the election, and that Mike Pence had no authority to dispense the ballot.
Well, I give you credit on that, but
I don't need credit. I just don't think you're fair to hear. I don't think I'm a sycophant. I don't think I'm in a blue bubble or a red bubble.
Can I say this to you though? If you want to be. I mean, you are in a position to tell some real truths, and I think sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. I was looking at something the other, an interview you did with Trump, fairly recently. I think I don't exactly when, but you kind of went on and said, look, I disagree about the stolen election, but I agree with you on so many other things. Some words to that effect. Well, you can't. I mean, this is a gentleman who is essentially trying to subvert the last election and the Constitution by so doing. And that's a huge thing to say. Well, hey, we disagree on that, but we agree on a lot of other things.
Look, if you've listened to this show for anything, I got a lot of Trump tattoos. And I've gone over this ground. It's like the burnt ground in upstate New York during the revival. I've gone over it with the former president 3 times, and there's no upside to writing the same column, is there? If you write the same column every week, are you writing a column?
Well, there's an upside to continuing to tell an important truth and not to gloss it over like it's a moment of inconsequential disagreement. And to
again, you're laying a lot on that line that my audience wouldn't think, and I'm just saying that a columnist who's trying to represent what happened in a conversation, we'll come back after the break, got to go up and down and out of the break, and says that I was talking about January 6th when I was clearly talking about the January 6th Select Committee, and they're very different things. And that's what I want to find out if you agree. Let me give you 30 seconds before the break. Do you agree with me that January 6th and the January 6th Select Committee are different things?
Well, I mean, obviously they different.
Uh-oh. We're going to come back to you, Scott. Your phone is breaking up on us, so don't go anywhere. We're going to reconnect that. I think you're walking around your house and you're peddling places that the signal doesn't go. Don't go anywhere. Scott Lehigh is coming right back.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the call. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
The leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. Boston Globe columnist Scott Lehigh joins me, Hugh Hewitt, in the conclusion. This will also be the interview podcast today. Later on the show, we're going to go after the show and continue. So, Scott, you are a columnist. I am a columnist. I have a columnist up at the Washington Post today that takes shots at Mark Esper. All right, that's what we do, right? We take shots. I do feel obliged to fairly represent people. Do you think you fairly represented me in your column?
You, yes, for the fourth time, I feel like I fairly represented you. Yes, I do think that's right. And I think that if you are saying, I will not talk about the January 6th committee because I believe it's illegitimate, I think that's nonsensical. The January 6th committee is the lens through which we are learning more and more and more about January 6th. And if you're not talking about that, you're missing all kinds of developments on that front. And this committee is certainly every bit as legitimate as, say, Kevin McCarthy's Benghazi Commission was, which people...
Okay, what's the difference between those two select committees?
You have to talk about stuff. You're just reverting to the same question over and over and over again.
So what is the difference between the 1-6 committee and...
So I think if you are not talking with your viewers about that, you are really doing a disservice to very important news for this country.
Well, we disagree. Now, my question, Scott, is what's the difference? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
How can you disagree with that?
Scott, it's an interview. It's not a debate. I want to get your point of view out there. It's an interview.
No, it is. This is a hugely important.
I'm not debating you. I'm asking you questions so my audience will understand what a left-wing columnist, the Boston Globe, thinks about a committee. That
you disagree, so you go back to something else, and you don't let me finish.
This is important. What's the difference between the January 6th Select Committee and Benghazi, which you brought up?
What's that?
You brought up the Benghazi Select Committee. It's the most recent Select Committee prior to 1/6 Select Committee.
Yes,
What's the difference between those two committees?
What is the difference between those two committees? You know, I mean, one was, you have a different, why don't you tell me the difference you want to...
No, I'm asking you, what do you see a difference between them? You're the guest, I'm the interviewer.
Well, I mean, you kind of go around a little bit on what, well, anyway, I do not see a difference between them in terms of coverage, the need to cover them, and the need for people to cooperate with them. No, I don't.
Do you see any difference in their origin and their setup?
Well, they're both House Select Committees. I mean, everything's a little bit different the way they. But the point is, to get back to the point, Hugh, if you are not talking about the news that's coming out of the January 6th committee, and if you are treating it as illegitimate and saying, "I'm not going to discuss this," then you are operating inside the context of the red bubble, and you're not doing.
I'm not. Most of my time is spent talking with a member of the Select Committee who critiques my approach to it. But I want you to I'm trying to tease out from you whether or not you are concerned about due process in the United States, because the left used to be concerned. The difference between the Benghazi Committee and the January 6th Committee is that the Benghazi Committee, impaneled by the Republican majority, allowed for the rights of the minority to name their own chair, their own counsel, and have equal subpoena power. That is not the case with the Select Committee. Do you think that's the distinction with a difference?
Well, I think you're looking, I mean, you can find little differences in everything, but if you're saying, oh, my Lord, Jim Jordan didn't get to be on the committee, I mean, he's someone who might have obviously he would not be interested in the role of the committee. Secondly, he perhaps has some involvement here that needs to be investigated. There are obvious conflicts here. So no, I think those honestly are little things that you're taking refuge in that don't, I think, in any way negate the larger point.
Have you ever been sued?
I don't want to get into personal questions about what...
Well, because I was going to ask you about how the representation went. Because the fact of the matter is, when there are two sides, the American legal system and the common law have for hundreds of years guaranteed the rights of both sides to the same.
You're looking for ways to justify ignoring an important and legitimate news investigatory organ here, and I just think it just doesn't stand.
Well, I think you're scared of this, Scott, because I'm explaining why it's an illegitimate committee, why I don't cover it.
You are trying to justify why you believe.
No, I'm explaining why I don't cover it. You think that's sycophantic. I'm pointing out that every House committee in history, has any other House committee in history run this way?
I think that's journalistically irresponsible not to cover it. Yeah, I do.
I've heard you say that. I heard you say it, but I'm trying to persuade you. You are wrong because it is illegitimate. Because it's never been done this way before. It's a one-off.
It's a runoff?
A one-off. Nothing has ever run this way before in the House.
Well, I think if you look at it, I think you'll find the American people are very interested in it. I think you'll find that that lots of news is coming out of it. I think you'll find that lots of people are cooperating with it. And I think to try to delegitimate it on what I consider, frankly, somewhat silly grounds.
You haven't taught constitutional law for 25 years. I have. The due process clause is not silly. I'm going to come back with Scott Lehigh on this subject, and we'll take our time. We don't have to rush. I want him to get his point of view out. He thinks it's wrong for me not to cover the January 6th committee. He stands by his column. That's fine. We want to get to the January 6th committee. Stay with us. It's on the interview with Hugh Hewitt.